Hello and welcome to the Al Monitor Brief. It's Tuesday, June 18th. I'm Kristen Tallman. Today's main segment is a conversation with James Zogby, Arab American Institute's president and co-founder. Recently, the Institute did extensive research into the Arab American vote and how the community is viewing the 2024 U.S. presidential elections. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. Israeli strikes on Tuesday killed at least 13 people in central Gaza, the civil defense agency in the Hamas-run territory said. Thousands of Israelis protested against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government on Monday over the Gaza war and the failure to negotiate the release of scores of hostages still held in the Palestinian territory. Israel's defense exports reached a new record of more than $13 billion in 2023, a year that also saw the October 7th Hamas attack in the south of the country and the ensuing war in Gaza. Dubai and Tel Aviv are among the most expensive cities in the world for expats, according to a survey released on Monday. The United States on Monday sanctioned actors it said were helping Yemen's Houthis generate revenue and acquire materials for weapons in a move meant to pressure the militants into halting their attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. And about 20 people have died and more are missing amid the ongoing Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, prompting officials to urge worshippers to avoid the blistering heat as climate change takes its toll on the region. And before we go on to the main segment, I do have to warn, I got a new microphone, and so you can hear a little bit more background sound, including a part where I'm click-clacking away as James is talking, jotting down notes. I apologize in advance, but James's segment is worth every single minute. So now on to the main conversation. Hey, James, welcome to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thank you for having me.
So, James, the Arab American Institute recently completed some research on the Arab vote in the U.S. Can you just talk us through what were the results and what was the survey on?
Well, we look every 2 years at the Arab American vote and see where it's going. We've been doing this since the 90s, the early 90s. And what we've noted is a trajectory, increasing identification with the Democratic Party, whereas in the 90s there was a slight Democratic edge. During the Bush administration, the margin between Democrats and Republicans grew, so that by the early Obama period, it was 2-1 Democrat and stayed 2-1 for the next 10 years. And even though in 2020, the number of people identifying as Democrat dropped, the number of identifying Republican also dropped. So it was still 2-1. It was 40 Democrat, 20 Republican. But what we have found in this poll is that the Republicans have kind of caught up. It's Democrats 32, Republicans 30, which is kind of where they were in the 90s. And this drop is largely the result of Gaza, and it's the result of Biden. In 2020, the margin was Biden 59, Trump 35. This year, in 2024, we're finding that it's Biden 18 and Trump 32. And when we ask voters what the most important issue is determining their vote, over 60% said it was Gaza.
Wow.
Even when we compared 10 issues and said, of these 10 issues, which 3 are the most important, 60% also said that Gaza was important. And I think it's something that people often forget, that in the Middle East, as our polling there shows, but also with Arab Americans here, Palestine is I call it the wound in the heart that never heals. And so it may be off the charts when nothing is happening, but when something is happening, and it's usually something negative happening, Arabs and Arab Americans alike feel that pain quite deeply. And the failure of the White House to respond, not only to stop Israel, but to speak early on with compassion toward Palestinians and to put a stop to what is plainly genocidal behavior, has not only diminished Arab American enthusiasm for the president and for his party, but it's also having an impact generally on their their feelings about politics. Almost 50% are either voting third party or not voting at all. The lack of enthusiasm is really noticeable in this election.
Wow. And so, I mean, it's incredible the amount that the Israel's war in Gaza has just rippled through American politics. And these voters, do you think 6 months is a long time, right? We're talking in June, 5 months now till November. What do you hear in terms of sentiment, or some of less of the figures, more of the responses that were less just a question, but more, comments? Do you think that there could be a shift by November?
Two things is I met with folks in the administration and the party early on in October, and I said, if this continues, there's no accounting for the damage it will do, both in terms of policy, but also in terms of politics. It's now 8 months later, and the damage has been done. There's no question that there's damage done. But what surprised me were two questions in the poll where we said, if the President Biden were to, and then one of them was demand a ceasefire and the unimpeded movement of aid throughout Gaza, would it make a difference? Would it make you more or less likely to support him? 60% said it would make them more likely to support him. We also then said, if the president were to suspend arms shipments to Israel and to no longer provide Israel diplomatic support at the United Nations, would it make it more likely or less likely for you to support? And it was a little over 60% said more likely. So that surprised me, because although damage has been done, it's not irreversible. The problem is that I see no indication that they would be likely to do any of the above. And when I was asked by a reporter, well, the president's pushing for a ceasefire, I said, the question says demand a ceasefire and suspend arms. And the way that the White House has framed their proposal is as an Israeli proposal, which the Palestinians must accept. That may make sense in their world of wanting to continue to, not be critical of Israel and provide Israel backup support in order to get them on board. It will not be enough, I believe, to sway Arab voters at all. It's a position more taken by default than by commitment to ending this. And frankly, it's a rather weak response to 37,000 dead. And malnutrition and an unfolding genocide. People want action, and they want to show that he has had enough of what Israel is doing. And they're not getting it.
Yeah.
But if he did, it would make a difference.
Okay, James, thank you so much for keeping our listeners up to the minute.
Sure. Thank you.
That's it for today. June 18th, you can read all these stories and more impacting the region at allmonitor.com.